you, Dr. Saiful. It was such a compact lecture, and as a lot was delivered, message was given from your side, and truly very relevant, very informative, and on the humanizing aspect of technology enhanced learning. And on the same note, I think I probably will be zooming in a little more at the micro level from his humanizing aspect of technology enhanced learning. And we'll be talking about very generally on the introduction of technology, and also Newcastle University's experience with technology when we embarked on a particular research in 2019. So I will be sharing on that. And also rethinking pedagogy for technology enhanced learning from every aspect that Prof. Saiful has highlighted just now. I think this is probably just one element that I think the academic community probably could consider, yeah. And I think probably is one way we could look forward in the context of humanizing, taking forward from his strong message that we had just now. So, well, as been much explained and explored this morning on technology, it's really about using the ICT in your teaching to give the students that enriching experience that we educators could potentially try to, in our pursuit, to enrich or to enhance their the learning experience as much as possible, and humanizing it. I'd really love to use this terminology, which I think it's very relevant, and it's truly lacking in research, as we do get a lot of publications, a lot of reports keep coming in on what are the issues for factors that is affecting a proper or successful implementation of TEL, which is technology enhanced learning. So I'll be using this abbreviation as I go forward with this. So it's really the fact that we all take it for granted that technology does enhance learning. I think that's just one notion that a lot of us have, that we feel the moment you include a technology in your teaching and learning activity, that it automatically does enhance. And I think Prof. Saiful very evidently explains this now. Teaching should be by design and not by chance. So I think taking that forward, we need to zoom into further looking at technology and see how we could actually plan our pedagogy and a little bit more relevant to the current online learners' diversity, current online learners' differences, and whatever that they bring on as an online learner to us when we are teaching for the students. So we know TEL is ubiquitous, it's part of our life now, and we are so ICT dependent by no choice. And it's really about how do we cultivate these 21st century learners as we go forward. And I think this word enhanced in higher education has very differing views. If you look at the evidence, very different way that it has been conceived in terms of what is it that we are really trying to enhance using these technologies. There are papers published talking about quantitative changes where technology is mainly aimed for to see the kind of performance improvement in the test scores on examination scores, or looking at, you know, just using technology in your current existing teaching in the context of just mere replication, but the fact that you have technology inside it. It's also about supplementing your existing teaching. So those sort of teaching where you use TEL, basically providing greater flexibility for students, you know, making resources more accessible, probably as a different way of looking at it. So if you look at this, is an interesting way that you can see the 3 different ways how it has been conceived in the context of what technology has really enhanced. So operational improvement is basically looking at technology or ICT, any ICT that we are using just to give that greater flexibility for the learners in making their resources more accessible, or looking at quantitative change in learning, where improvement is merely seen to see that enhancement in the performance, or when you're using ICT to aiming to promote a reflection on learning, practicing, giving them much more interactions, much more engagement, to give that a richer understanding of whatever concepts and ideas that you are trying to bring forward in your classroom or in your workplace teaching. So this sort of qualitative change, which is conceived as enhancement, is what we are talking about, that you actually teach incorporating ICTs or technology to see that kind of enhancement, where you actually have to redesign, rethink your pedagogy in that context. So this is an interesting way of looking at 3 different ways of looking at how we could potentially look at enhancement per se. So there's also various factors that has been abundance of papers publishing on using technology. What are the factors for successful implementation? But interestingly, there are a couple of evidences that keep coming back with looking at other aspects, but very few factors that have been reported looking at teachers' aspects. Requirement on teachers, like this particular graph here, talk about social aspects, teachers, teaching aspects, cost-related aspects. Now, these are the ones that you really, I think we need to focus on and give our time in trying to develop and design that kind of teaching, give that relevant or the desired learning needs for the students. And it's very lowly rated or used and reported in terms of how that can successfully implement in technology enhancement. And it's probably perhaps why we keep seeing the barriers to technology. It's really looking at teachers level inhibitors, school level inhibitors, or the system level inhibitors. And we do get that that level, talking about teachers' confidence, lacking in ICT, pedagogical training, and so forth. Lack of time in preparing. And at school level, it's really about that lack of suitable educational softwares, limiting access to ICT, hardwares, maintenance, well-designed infrastructures. And also looking at the system level, where the kind of curricula we are still adhering to very much on the curricula, like how it was mentioned earlier by Prof. Saiful. Our curricula can actually be ICT versatile if we actually design it effectively. But I think we are still have not shifted to relook at curricula in that context, and also a rigid traditional educational system that has still ongoing at system level in higher education. So that's probably reasons that we keep getting evidence reporting on these common barriers that we see. So again, the kind of lacking in knowledge of ICT literacy and competency is important, and it is very logical to think about it when we actually see that that's the only way you could actually bring on that cultivate that knowledge building process that we could do for our students when the teachers are literate and competent with the use of ITC, so that they can see that capacity, how they can support the students in their knowledge building process. And they need to have that ICT literate enough to recognize opportunities and possibilities that ICT offers. Now, on the other aspect, there's so much talk about digital natives or the mobile natives of our students, but still there's a lot of evidence that has looked at the incompetent or the literacy, lacking in the literacy rate among our students, which is again undermined and causing that difficulties or causing that barrier in the kind of interactions that we expect from our students when we use ICT in our classrooms or in our workplace learning to help them construct their own learning. So it's about teachers lacking in that skill of ICT knowledge, as well as the students, the so-called digital natives or the mobile natives that we are talking about with the current 21st century learners. And I think it is something we need to look at so that, you know, using ICT potentially can be maximized if we address all these elements that we spoke about. So what we did, I would like to share with you what we did in 2019. We went on embarking on a transnational research across Newcastle University in UK with 2 branch campuses, that is us in Malaysia, in Johor, as well as Singapore, which is engineering campus based. So it was a University Education Committee funded project, and it just added on to the TEL study as a transnational research. So what we did, we went on looking at qualitatively staffs and students' wants and needs with technology. And we conducted a 16 focus group across these 3 campuses. And in our pursuit, in trying to understand staffs and students' experience with TEL, and to uncover what are the barriers and what are the facilitators with TEL at that current use. So this study gave us an in-depth understanding of the current use of TEL across the campuses in our pursuit in trying to be globally competitive university education with appropriate academic as well as digital literacy skill. So several key tools emerged from this study, and I would like to talk a little bit about these technology-enhanced learning tools that we identified through our data. So recap was one of the much spoke about TEL tool, and was really viewed as fundamental to learning across the 3 campuses, which was also interestingly, a lot of the technology-enhanced learning tools that was utilized by staffs and students, despite the geographical differences that we are in, it tend to be a universal language in terms of agreement and disagreement with their experiences using technology. And students highly favored the Ombia and the Socrative, which is the audience response system. And they found that to be very supportive to their understanding of concepts and ideas when they went during their learning experiences. And being digital natives, they simply loved their mobile learning as well as social media for communication and for ease of discussion among their peers. And they found that to be very, very useful in their day-to-day learning. Now, Microsoft Teams was another TEL tool, very much appreciated, but mainly for project-based tasks that was given to them. And Canvas, which, well, back then we had Blackboard in 2019, which is now we have changed to Canvas in our using our as one of our main technology enhanced learning tools. And they found that it is very much appraised for its accessibility of information and especially time effectiveness. So these were the main key TEL tools that has been identified across the 3 campuses. And I would like to share these 2 major themes that emerged from our 16 focus group across the 3 campuses, mainly looking at physical and mental health. Basically, what Prof. Saiful mentioned about well-being was one of the key things which came out interestingly from this data, and also technical abilities and training for TEL use. So we very nicely correlated this morning in that sense when we speak about humanizing technology and how our Newcastle experience is also similarly have had this insight from these data. So students and staff shared abundance of positive aspects, but also there were negative elements that were main stressors in their day-to-day activity when ICT was not implemented effectively. So let's just look at this, the positive part of it. Student found recap to be fundamental because there were a lot of positive aspects of supporting their well-being in terms of revision period, the fact that they could not attend a session but still can learn using the recap, the lecture capture tools. And also, interestingly, students highlighted on how it had supported those students with learning disabilities like dyslexia, visual impairments. Recap was such a great support. And also those who have financial constraints, who had to work and be part-time student, Recap was such a great tool in supporting their learning. On the other hand, Ombia and Socrative was seen to be very conducive and creating a very non-threatening environment for students to learn, especially for those overly shy students who do not want to appear, they claimed, they used the word, do not want to appear stupid by asking the question, and still they can ask the question and clarify their doubts. And it was a way of self-assessing themselves in looking at how a quick reassessment about their understanding about the topic during the session, and also that engagement, the community communicating and discussing on the relevant topic. In the context of teachers, I think the staffs were very happy to have Ombia and Socrative as a great enhancing their teaching skills, because they could develop good questions. They could also control the pace of learning, especially when they are teaching very difficult concepts, very difficult philosophies, where they could give that time for students to think and interact and respond to Ombia and Socrative. So that paced learning was able to be created during the teaching session as per se. So these were some of the key things they mentioned with the use of audience response system that actually enhanced the well-being. Now, mobile learning was something they all spoke about, especially students across these 3 campuses, that convenience was the key word. They could learn anywhere, everywhere, at any time. And the fact they don't have to carry books and walk around, especially medical students in the wards, mobile learning was such a great tool for a quick check or a quick learning gadget in that sense. So we could see how the physical well-being as well as the mental well-being that is enhanced by using these tools across the 3 campuses. So on the other hand, having spoke so much about the positive aspect, students also mentioned a couple of few things in terms of how the access to materials with ICT was just simply overwhelming. And also the fact that there were inconsistency in how technology was applied, how the changes in the timetables that was updated was not visible in their app, and lack of technical abilities or the variations across staffs in terms of their technical ability in using ICT was a stressor itself that had a significant impact on their mental welfare. And the fact that keep recurring in all these three campuses, one of the things that keep recurring was the fact that with the existing time constraint and the workload across teachers, the fact you have been, the pressure of using ICT, especially now with the pandemic, created much stress, because the fact that they mentioned it does take time to plan and implement your teaching with ICT, and that's not considered by institutions. So that was quite a big stressor element for the teachers. And a couple of other things that was also mentioned was the fear of technology failing, which is partly because of technical ability as well as technical support provided by the institutions. One of the commonly spoken about or discussed about across the three campuses was also the fact that they had to sit long hours during their Zoom sessions, synchronous, especially that strained on their eyes, created a strain on their eyes and creating neck pain and back pain situations. And that was something was also, so we need to look at in the context of higher education, how we can support students' well-being in that sense. So we could see that these are the humanizing aspect probably that we are getting directly from the consumers here, especially that immediately after the data that we collected, we went into a pandemic period in 2020 and 2021. Some of the barriers which was also shared was that, not surprisingly, is the knowledge of technology use. As you can see, it's still a challenge to think about applying within your pedagogical fit in under what theme of pedagogy that we are coming from. How do we arrive to that particular pedagogy? What do we choose? What would be the most appropriate for this particular type of teaching or this particular type of knowledge that we are trying to deliver? Is still a challenge among educators. And this is something that is much reported in evidence if we look at, and it's one of the main factor impeding effective use of TEL uptake, really. Now, time intensive, again, was a barrier, like as mentioned, as much as it was a stressor, but it's also a barrier because staff wanted that protected time for them to develop their teaching materials, or let's put it much more appropriate term for that would be to design your teaching sessions with ICT. And that was a main thing where I think a lot of higher educational institutions are overlooking at, giving staff that protected time for them to develop their teaching materials using ICT. And lack of technical support was another common area. There were variation among staffs and students in terms of ability to use the ICTs that was available within the institution, and the attitude toward the technology. Staffs wanting recognition, motivation, interest, and the change of mindset was also viewed to be a very crucial factor in the successful use of TEL. Now, finally, organization support, of course, is one of the most important elements. That is, the support in terms of the hardware and other software infrastructures in place has a great impact on the triability of TEL use among staffs and students. Perhaps these are what we are looking at are some of the key things that's contributing to a high attrition rate. If we actually look at the evidence in terms of attrition rate, there's almost 80% for online learning contexts. students are not connected. Despite that, you know, we think we are trying to attempt to make that engagement, interactions to happen in our teaching sessions. So student may appear to be digitally literate, but might not have the skills also required to be connected. So there are many aspects that we could actually look at why there's a high attrition rate. And this is something we need to look at if we are talking about sustainability of e-learning in higher education. So it is also something where we spoke about on a day-to-day basis, and also in our department meeting, how students are not engaging with our online sessions, and the inadequate attendance with the online session, and how much are they qualified to complete the assignments and complete the course when you have such poor attendance coming in for that particular semester and for that particular course. So that's the reality. And then some of the key things I think it's also that look at, and I think this interesting model talks about some of the key things when you think about why students are engaged and not engaged in online learning sessions. To look at teachers' participation is probably one of the most important things. Working alone decreases engagement compared to working with the teacher as a facilitator and as a supporter. You know, and also some of the other attitudes that learners bring on when they are on online that also causes that engagement and disengagement aspect. That's probably one of the case that we could look at attrition rate. Now, the reality, one of the reality I think is there in the evidence, we just keep emerging every now and then, is the fact that instructors and the instructional designers at most institutions are lacking that pedagogical training, as what Prof. Saiful have mentioned earlier, to deliver that online content effectively. If educational technology is to really live up to enhance online learning, I think that shift in the paradigm of for instructional design and also deliver the content that is needed. So is crucial, and that is something we really need to focus on. Typically on online delivery, if we look at it, it's about delivering a fixed content within a fixed amount of time. And when you have to consider the slow learners and the fast learners, and how much are they pacing together with you, and what strategies we have implemented for those different rate of learning that that we'll definitely have in any fixed number of students we have in our class. What this particular TEL research, this transnational research added on to us, our understanding was that it had both positive and negative in terms of well-being. And we had abundance of data explaining why the positives and the negative aspects influencing staffs and students' well-being in an institution. And here we are talking about 3 different institutions situated in a totally different geographical location. Also, we did understand that using TEL for teaching and learning should mitigate these stresses rather than adding them on. And what we had recommended was to look at having a better consistency of using across these 3 institutions, management of students' expectation, and also, of course, not to forget, training to develop staffs with the use of TEL practices, especially looking at pedagogical support for TEL practices. So with that, what we did in 2021, the FMS TEL team of Newcastle, UK, organized an online conference on TEL. That was last year. That was the first conference held, basically to create that common platform for the other campuses to come in to share their common experience. And it was a great start. And we hope that we could expand and grow with more ideas to support each other and to learn from each other with these challenges that we endeavor in our day-to-day practice with using TEL. So the way forward is to rethink pedagogy for this current educational era. We need to probably look at it from the maybe looking at fitting the right pedagogy with technology, and trying to perhaps trying to understand maybe understanding in how we could fit in certain pedagogical model that might fit in TEL. Now here, I'm driven to talk about the TPACK here, technology, pedagogical, content knowledge, that I think is a great model, is a great framework that brings us to an understanding as educator in higher education. What are the areas that we need to equip ourselves with in trying to understand? So TPACK framework emphasizes on how the connections among teachers, understanding of the content, you as a content expert, and how do you bring in the right pedagogy and the technology to create that enriching interaction with one another to produce effective teaching. So that's what TPACK is all about. I will give you a little bit of insight about TPACK. Secondly, also understanding what is the 21st century competencies that we need to cultivate across the current digital natives that we have. And we are as already stepping into Education 4.0. We are now still revolving around Education 3.0, and Education 4.0, as what Prof. Saiful has mentioned, is ready to fit into the Industrial Revolution of 4.0 that talks a lot about digitalization, automation, mass production, and it's a totally different ball game altogether. And we need to fit the right competencies among our graduates. And one way to look at it, I think the change that we need to look at is trying to redesign and deliver our e-learning in that context. So probably the way forward here is looking at design thinking whenever we plan our teaching sessions. Design thinking basically focuses on what can be done in actual practice. It enables you to transcend the belief mode of thinking and to work creatively with ideas that yield some practical solutions for our 21st century learners. So let's look at it. TPACK, I'd just like to take you through. So as an educator, I think when we talk so much about ICT and enhancement in our higher education, we need to think about the fact that we need to know, or make a point to know within our content expert, how we could bring in technology effectively in the context of application used by professional in that particular subject area. What are the websites with online materials for studying that particular subject? Technologies used to illustrate difficult contents in the particular subject matter, and also using to better understand the content itself. So what are the tools within ICT available for that particular subject matter is what technology content knowledge is all about, and also to look at how to use them in terms of technology, pedagogical knowledge, where as an educator, we need to look at it, ICT in teaching for students to plan their own learning, ICT in teaching for students, reflective thinking, what sort of tool we can bring in to teach for sharing of ideas and thinking together, what sort of TEL tool for students to boost or to develop that creative thinking, critical thinking, problem solving, which are all 21st century learner skills and competency that is very much sought after. So I find this framework to be very supportive, and it's a great guideline to assist educators in trying to incorporate technology. Hopefully that it will give you that relevant and meaningful enhancement that we are talking about using ICT. So for example, I've just given a very simple sketch on how you can bring in the different teaching methods like small group work or a flipped classroom, and bringing in podcasts, videos, and or any other ICT materials that will fit into that cognitive process, that will fit in to promote that engagement, metacognition, so that you can help the learner to externalize their learning. And this is just one way of looking at it. And I think the idea is borderless. It's just abundance out there, and it's really up to your creativity how you can bring this alive. So that the learner can better manage their learning. It's all about learning management, really, when we design our session classes effectively. Now, on the other hand, I think not much spoke about is learning theories, educational theories. And we are still in the same approach to teaching, only that we have jumped into ICT now in the last 2 years. So I think we still have to go back, look at the much used learning theories and how we could potentially maximize or optimize them. But now thinking of it in a more pedagogical, technological context approach. So with that, I probably would like to just highlight one of these interesting paper, very recent paper, how he has actually brought in social constructivism to support in a Zoom session where they created a small group discussion using jigsaw method, where, bringing in, putting students in a breakout room and giving them the relevant task of a topic to research and to present the topic as a content expert themselves. So promoting that critical thinking, that problem-solving skills on a particular topic, and to give them that enrichment of understanding. So it's here that the social platform that was created via Zoom through the breakout rooms actually help them each other to present the material, to talk about the material in a deeper level, so that that social construction of knowledge can take place. And that is one great way to facilitate the 21st century learner skills. And of course, creating that online community of learner and trying to bring in the cognitive skills, intrapersonal, interpersonal, technical skills in all your materials that you deliver through your Zoom sessions, so that, you could actually cultivate those skills. That is very much reported to be a challenge when pedagogical knowledge is lacking when you're incorporating ICT. Adult learning theory is another great way of looking at all these 6 principles of adult learning theory. I think being as an online facilitator now, I think it is one great way we could actually facilitate how adults need to know what they don't know, which is one of the key classical characteristic of adult learning theory. And I think as facilitator, we can easily facilitate and help them to become aware of what that they need to know and what they don't know, using online discussion tools, Padlets, and so many other ICT tools positively. So for the students to provide their feedback, to share their ideas, their experience with each other, because adults learn best when they are sharing their experiences. And online discussion, e-portfolios, these are some of the things which you can use where they can bring in the experiential learning in a much more relevant way to support each other, to encourage that dialogue between instructors and the learners, facilitating their self-concept as adult learners. And there's just so much of abundance of positive educational values that we could cultivate when you bring in the pedagogy in the right manner, in the right context within your subject matter to cultivate that. So prior experience here is another thing that you can engage the student with: online blog discussion, sharing, bringing in all their entries, learners reading each other's entries and learning from each other in that sense. And that itself is a great motivation for the adult learners to learn. So I think adult learning theory could be one great way, but of course, looking at it from your particular content. And I think these are just some of the key things, but evidence out there is just abundance when, you know, using the right pedagogy with ICT or TEL to give that, to promote that appropriate enhancement that we are talking about. And are we really understanding enhancement correctly in that sense? So just to show you all these tools, ICT tools that we are currently using, being aware what they can actually promote and enhance to meet that educational needs for our learner, I think is important. And audience response system, just based on our study just now, we had so much of positive elements that was spoke about. And this is just an evidence to share with you how audience response system has a great impact on the student, on the learning environment, as well as some other additional factors, promoting self-reflection from the student's aspect, self-assessment, self-involvement, confidence, and metacognition. On the learning environment itself, just using these Ombius and Socrates or Kahoot or classroom interaction response system, whatever you have or whatever that is accessible within your institution can create such great self-directed learning environment, giving them immediate feedback, that enhancing that formative assessment or formative learning for the student. And this is what the learners are very much looking forward for, to improve their learning and participation. And this creates a sense of a healthy competition when they're learning within a particular context, discussion, collaborative learning. And again, this is a great social constructivist approach to by using ARS, audience response system, in your session. Some other key aspects of, I think, the beauty about ARS is the fact it's anonymity, where it preserves anonymous during interaction, that creates a very safe zones for learners, comforting learning environment that alleviates that anxiety, who answered this and who did not. So it's that willingness to participate and not having that fear of having that criticism and ridiculed by your peers is just a great way to promote a non-threatening learning environment among the learners. So I think that's just some of these really positive way of looking at ARS. Now, I think another key thing that probably we would like to explore is cognitivism as a new learning theory for this digital age. Of course, I'm not going to deny that there's a lot of criticism involved. There's a lot of critics about cognitivism not being an actual learning theory. It is just a pedagogical framework. Whatever said that done, I leave it to you as a user or consumer or as educator in higher education. But it's just something, interestingly, we could look at some of the 7 principles that learning is now no more situated in a building where students need to go to the university and learn from a professor or from a lecturer, because learning knowledge is now so diverse. It is just distributed, it is networked, and the act of learning and the landscape of learning has totally changed. And I think this theory explains that very beautifully. Creating and navigating those networks is the skill that's very much looked after for the current 21st century learner. So in this context, it is incomplete to talk about TEL without talking about this theory. So connectivism theory, it asserts that knowledge and learning are very distributive. It's located in any given place, but instead, it's really about the skill of learners trying to make that connections and experiencing with that interaction between individuals, societies, organizations, technologies, and to link all these together. And learning may be residing in non-human appliances. And it also talks about the currency in learning in the current digital era is really about accuracy, up-to-date knowledge. It's not, it is the intent of all connectivist learning activity. It's not about what you already know, it's about how your willingness to know more and the skill of how to know that more, and using all these knowledge of networks that's available for learning that particular subject matter. So it's the ability to see the connections between fields, ideas, concepts, and core skills, that what we are looking for in our learners. And also the capacity to know more it seems to be more critical or more important than what is currently known about that particular topic. And finally, nurturing and maintaining the connection is needed to facilitate continuous learning with the online learning platform that currently, and this is the challenge really, isn't it, that we are talking about, keeping and nurturing and maintaining that connection. And our role as teacher in trying to do that is definitely being very much challenged, especially in the last 2 years. And I think we are continuously learning and progressing to do just that for the sustainability of e-learning for future-ready graduates, to create that future-ready curricula and a future-ready aligned pedagogy to do that. So with that, my concluding remark for today is this, which is almost univocal agreement that well-designed courses is imperative. And I'm on the same note as what Prof. Saiful has mentioned, that teaching should be by design and not by chance. Very well said. Clear guidelines and expectation is key. Giving a structure to your online teaching experience, online discussions for interactions, individualized, timely, formative feedback is also important. Continuous instructor involvement, you as a facilitator, and also interactive content and flexible deadlines. So some of these key things, I think, are important message that we could take forward for today. And with that, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and thank you us for organizing this great session. I think you've done a great job, and I pass the baton to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhavani. Some questions that were sent during the